Hello again, my friends. It is Ray over at CigarClimatology once more, and we're continuing on our Generation 12 CigarClimatology Humidor Kit. This is the section where what we're going to do is we are going to disassemble the previously removed stock controller out of the cooler. And that's upside down for you guys. So this is essentially what that controller looks like. It actually hangs up on the top of the cooler, basically like this. And this is the bottom side, and this would be the top side that rests up against the cooler. We previously went over extracting this from the cooler. There are two things that are of importance here. A, not stripping the two screws that hold it up, and not breaking these two prongs that you can see here that slide in and catch the controller housing. Now these new controllers or these newer wine coolers and or beverage coolers that are coming with this new LED light. So what we're going to try and do, I think this time, is we might actually try and preserve that light and try to put it back in later. It looks like it just runs off a 12-volt DC current. I don't know how long it'll last, but I've gone ahead and I've tried one of these things hooked up to 12-volt DC, so I think I'm just going to put it back. And what we might do is install a switch here and one of the other places. I don't really think much about the light, so that's not really a part of the kit. That's something that you can go ahead and do on your own. But if you want to try and preserve it, go ahead. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to unplug it from the motherboard there. And what it takes is a number 2 Phillips screwdriver. As you know, I like my power tools. So we're going to go ahead and preserve those screws and put those out of the way. And we're going to preserve the light assembly as well. Okay, so this is actually my controller, which you see right here. And this controller is going to fit into this housing right where the old controller once hailed from. So what you want to try and do here is you just want to try to not bust up the housing, because if you do, then we're going to have to go with let's call an aftermarket or a housing that I would have to make and supply at an extra cost. So we really don't, we want to avoid that if we can, because these little housings work pretty well. Now, I try not to ruin this stuff, but if it gets ruined, it matters very little, because this controller is garbage, and that's the end of it as far as we're concerned. But like I said, what you don't want to do is you don't want to damage the housing to the extent that you can't put the new controller back into it. So as you can see, I've just pulled the cables off. They're fairly easy, and there's a couple of screws here. We can get them. Number 2 Phillips is a little, just a tad big, and there are only 2 screws that hold this in. So those are out. And then what we can also do is we can attempt to pop this little guy out. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little glue here on the board. And that's pretty much what keeps the standard board in. So as you can see, what I did is I just kind of broke the glue joints right here. There's 4 of them. It's just hot glue. and then tilted and actually pulled the display out. Again, if you want to keep it, it's up to you, but it's garbage as far as I'm concerned. So that's now gone, and there's the motherboard. So that's the old controller, and so your system now is essentially disassembled and destroyed as far as being a beverage cooler is concerned. But that really should not bother you much. So the next step here is the removal of the front screen. Let me try and do that without breaking it. And there it is. Okay, so like everything else, it just requires a little bit of force. And that's it. Boom, bang. Empty. Gone. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to see how this fits in. And hey, look at that. Perfecto. Doesn't get much better than that, does it? Looks like it was meant to fit in there. And in fact, it really does seem like it. Now, this is not yet wired. And these parts back here are going to cause a little bit of a problem as far as that's concerned, because the actual wiring which will be done for you on the back of the controller is kind of complex, but like I said, it's going to be done for you, and they all include these quick connect items, these connectors. And as you can see, with the connectors in place, there's really going to be zero room for the wiring. Now, these connectors are simply slip fit, and the nice thing about them is that they're more or less coated. Okay, you can't really put them in upside down because they don't fit. Okay, and there's a 6-position connector, a 5-position connector, and then a 12-position connector, and then the 2-position power connector here. So you can't really screw them up. And like I said, if you guys are nervous about this, don't be, because all these connectors will essentially be wired together in a correct fashion out to a plug connector at the end so that you can plug right into it. But everything goes into this. This is a powerful little controller, so depending upon which options you get with your cooler, you will have heating, cooling, dehydration, and adding water or hydration from your humidifier. So all of that gets controlled out of this little box. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to remove this plastic in here. And you know, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do this, and frankly, I've never used this method. I've always used a power tool. But since a lot of you guys don't have power tools, you know, that you can get in there and do this, this happens to be something that most of you probably won't have either. It's a hoof nipper for trimming the hooves of horses. I use it to trim a lot of plastic parts, but you can get smaller wire nippers that are like this that can really help you with this. Now, since these things are designed for cutting hooves, you can see that they really kind of cut through the plastic like butter. That's that one. And there goes another one. So that's the end of that. And we'll go ahead and try this fit once more. Now that's going to provide a lot, one heck of a lot more room for us to go ahead and put in our wiring. Now, if we take this piece out, then we're not going to be able to refit our lamps, which again is something that I think I want to do. So our wiring is going to end up coming out here. We're going to go ahead and leave this plastic lens in place for the lamp if we can get away with it, and then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and try and run the rest of our wiring out through these little ports here. Disassemble this bad boy. Okay, so that guy comes out relatively easily as well. And this will allow us to run our wiring out through the back, out through this area, and then since our connectors probably wouldn't fit through it, we can just sandwich it right back up and put the wires in it. Now, since we do have the controller right here, I just want to give you a quick demonstration as to how the controller fits in, and these guys can be a little tricky, but they're not, they're not that complex. And there you go. One goes on each side, and then what it does is it snugs the controller, which has a small rubber gasket in it, and holds it in place. And since this was stout enough to hold the other controller, it certainly works for our purposes. Now, in order to remove this, you just have to depress this little guy and then pull it, because it's got a little ratchet action which holds it on there. And I'll show that to you. If you depress on the forward side here, then what it does is it releases the ratchet right there. Okay, so when you press this, it releases the ratchet, and then you can just slide these guys back off. Now, don't lose these parts, because they're going to come essentially attached. They're going to be left on your controller, and you don't want to lose them. And obviously, you're not going to want to lose any of the connectors either. But like I said, all of this will be wired for you. So it's not going to be easy. There'll be all kinds of wires to it, and I'll show you that a little bit later when it comes to actually your portion of wiring up the controller, which will be really easy. You're not going to have to fool with any of these, because I don't expect you to figure that stuff out. I don't expect you to figure out really what goes to where, with the exception of the Molex type connectors that we're going to use, and they're going to be out here, kind of pigtailed out here at the end. So they'll be real easy to figure out. They're color coded and all the rest. There's not going to be much to that. So there you go. That's essentially enough room, as you can probably see. That's enough room for your wiring in there. And if worse comes to worse, if you really got crunched, we can go ahead and chop this guy out too. But there's not a heck of a lot to it. Now, for some of you guys who do use power tools, that's also an option. I typically use a Fordham tool, which is it's like a porting tool. But a lot of you guys might have Dremel Moto tools. This is a real old one with a little cutting blade on it. And I use a foot power control. So, if you're going to use something like this, it's the same thing. You can just get in here and you can get in there and you can cut these guys out with your Moto tool, or with your electric type cutter. I just want to get the little bit of a mess that I made out of there for the sake of demonstration. Like I said, I use the hoof nipper. The hoof nipper is real easy. Took it out in just a second. Now I can't imagine that you can't just bend this guy over maybe and break it out, but if you break it through here, you know, obviously you'll have a problem and you don't want to do that. So the whole idea is to try and preserve that guy. So that's this part of the tutorial and the build. And once we get the controller wired up, what we'll do is I'll show you exactly how to assemble this and put it back together. But that's all we need to do for now. Thanks a lot for watching.